Okay, so when it comes to web hosting, right, it's the very important component because the web hosting is pretty much like hosting all your website information. And then when it comes to CMS, it means to be a content management system, and it's in a way something that is quite important in terms of like how it relates to SEO as well. So how web hosting works is that in the internet, right? So in a way, the HTTP will actually send like a request and then get a response to the internet on the front end side, right? You need to load the web page to the front end user. So web hosting servers are space where websites can be live and be stored while being accessible in the internet. So if you want your website to be live online, you need a web hosting. So when considering web hosting package, right, you have to understand what do you want to get out of the website. Are you like trying to run a professional blog and it doesn't need to load up any sort of like functionality as well as like heavy content? If that's the case, then like very simple hosting will be sufficient most of the time. And if it's an online store like e-commerce, right, then some of the important factors will be the reliability and speed as well. So in Singapore, you can buy web hosting in a lot of places, like from Vodafone, GoDaddy, SiteGround, and other channels as well. So when you actually like looking at your hosting option, there are also a lot of like terminology, like say like WordPress hosting and all these. So WordPress hosting is pretty much like more or less optimized around WordPress, and then maybe you have other like additional feature as well. But it's actually not really necessary in most cases.
Yeah, so before you buy hosting, right, you need to know where the servers are located. Okay, so if you want to target audiences in Singapore, it's better to host your site in Singapore. Is that right, Robert? Am I right? Okay, okay, just to double confirm, just in case. Yeah, because the site will load faster and all that. But Singapore hosting is a bit more expensive compared to a US server. Okay, so GoDaddy, I think it's quite cheap, but Vodafone can be very expensive because Vodafone hostings the servers are all based in Singapore. The data centers are in Singapore. So yeah, so you have to look which part of the world your client wants to target, right?
Okay, so that will be the terminology is the data center. So when checking hosting, it will be important to look at the location of the data center. Most of the hosts, the one that we are using most of the time, like Cloudways and of course Modius, they have a local Singapore-based data center, which actually helps a lot in terms of like site speed and etc. So when it comes to different hosting type, that's what we call the shared hosting, meaning to say that you are sharing the physical server space with a lot of other websites that the host company is actually like really selling in terms of the plan. So it comes with some trade-off in terms of, because you're sharing, so like the resources might be ran out like quite easily, especially when like a website traffic suddenly peaks. Like sometimes maybe like you're running an e-commerce and during the peak season, the website might find that it's like getting very slow. Then might be because these type of like resources picked up and not really in a way enough for your hosting needs in the first place. Then there's also one that's called VPS, Virtual Private Server. It's actually more ideal for people who actually need more than a shared plan, but then doesn't require like a dedicated server by themselves. So Cloudways is actually a managed cloud hosting that doesn't have their own services. They don't own any like data center or stock, but they are actually more of like a reseller in other like cloud service, like say Voucher, Amazon Web Hosting, and like other hosts like VPS network. Then how do we choose the web hosting? Ensure there's that high uptime. Server location is located as close to your majority site visitor as possible. And then VPS is actually most of the time preferred over shared hosting. And then security as well is actually one of the important factor. And then the customer support, which is quite important as well, as we have gone through when trying to set up the site lah. Yeah. Then domain registrar, I think this I will go through quickly. So DNS record is pretty much like a zone file that is live in the DNS server to actually provide information of including like IP address and all these to point to the domain and to link up your domain to the host. Name server is pretty much like works in tandem with the DNS record. It means like a different thing altogether lah. So name server is a library where DNS record the catalog. Then how do you set up the name server, right? Using hosting with other spammy sites can damage your website's credibility. So sharing name server can also like result in slower site speed and downtime. So there are different type of like records. So commonly the A record, CNAME record, the mail MX record is the mail exchange record. Then you can see in the screenshot, right? So from here we already see three type of record. So one is the A record. So A stands for address. So this is usually used when you actually set up the IP to point your website to the domain. A record is something similar, but then it's actually like of a more a record to actually set up like a unique IP address. CNAME record is more for running different like FTP or other web pages that is not really needed to know for SEO purpose. Then of course we also have the name server record as well. And mail exchange is commonly used for like setting up like emails within the domain you want to use. Then lastly will be the TXT record, in which is commonly used in SEO for verifying the domain verification.
Yeah, so in most cases,